In our last video, we finished setting up 2 servers with WordPress sites on them. And we also finished setting up an instance of Elasticsearch and Kibana. In this video, we will start connecting these WordPress servers with our Elastic Stack. We will start by installing the Beats library to our WordPress servers, and then the Beats library will send observability data to our Elasticsearch platform. If you go to our YouTube channel, you will see this playlist here called Elasticsearch Beats. And when you click on it, you will see that in the past, we already created quite a few videos on how to install and use the Beats library. So that would include metric beat, audit beat, packet beat, file beat, and heartbeat. And many of the things that we're going to discuss in today's episode, it will have already been covered by one of these previous videos. So in this video, I will summarize some of the key points mentioned in these previous videos, and I may refer to specific segments within these other videos. Additionally, in this video, I will cite some of the things that we have learned since publishing these previous videos. Before we begin, I want to say that if you find these videos helpful, you can support us by pressing like on our videos and subscribing to our channel. If you run into issues following this video, you can leave a comment below. If your issue is more complex, then it is better to send us an email through our website. That way we can exchange emails, exchange logs for troubleshooting, or even set up a virtual meeting to resolve the issues together. All right, let's get started. So coming back to our fresh new instance of the Elastic Stack, and if we click to the menu and we click on the observability section, you'll see that for the most part, it looks like there's really nothing here. The only thing that's showing up are these monitors here. And that's because, that's because we already have Heartbeat installed on the Elastic Stack, and we'll discuss Heartbeat in the later episodes. But for all these other modules here, you'll see that they're empty. The moment we install the Beats library, we're going to see that some of these dashboards and widgets will start to appear. Additionally, if we click to dashboards, you'll see that they're completely empty here. The moment we install the Beats library and we configure a few things, we're going to see a bunch of boiler template dashboards available through here. So let's get started. So as mentioned in our demonstration video, right at the outset, at the beginning, our WordPress servers don't know how to connect to the Elastic and Kibana instance. In other words, we need to reference the Elastic and Kibana instance through the host names ES01 and Kibana. But I didn't publish any DNS records for ES01 or Kibana, so we will need to update the host files of each of the WordPress servers so that ES01 and Kibana actually reference the IP address of the Elastic Stack. So we're going to go ahead and do that first. So I have 3 terminal windows opened up. This is our terminal window for the Elastic Stack, terminal window for the first WordPress server that has the web1 to web3.evermite.net, and this is the terminal window for our second WordPress server for web4 to web6.evermite.net. Let's grab the IP address of this machine. Let's do this. And it is this one over here for this interface, the ETH01 interface. And let's edit the host file. Okay, and that's the wrong one. Copy, paste, ES01, Kibana. I'll just copy this whole thing. Save, exit, and let's go to this one. There we go. So now these WordPress servers know how to find this Elastic Stack based on the host name or common name. So let's come back to our documentation, and actually in our last video we stopped around here. we didn't complete steps 1.3 and 1.4 yet, which I will actually come back to later. The reason I'm skipping it now, or rather in the demonstration video, it made sense to explain steps 1.3 and 1.4 first because it was demonstration. We want to get things up and running. But for the purposes of learning how our platform works, I'm going to skip these two steps for now, or I'm going to postpone it until a little bit later, because these two steps will make a lot more sense after I've completed these steps. Okay. And right now we just completed this step on each of our WordPress servers. We update our host file so that ES01 and Kibana reference the IP address for the Elastic Stack. So the next thing is, in order for any services or applications on our WordPress servers to be able to connect with the Elasticsearch or Kibana services, we need a copy of the certificate authority that was created by the Elastic Stack. So again, we signed SSL certificates with this certificate authority, right? This one. And the SSL certificates were signed for the domains or host names ES01 and Kibana. So we need a copy of this CA certificate on our WordPress servers so that any software, whether it's the Beats library, whether it's a WordPress plugin, curl statements, other PHP applications, other Python applications, or anything else, in order for those other services to connect with ES01 and Kibana and to verify the certificates, we need a copy of the original CA certificate. So I am going to make a directory called etc search es on each of the WordPress servers, and then we'll copy the certificate authority into this directory. So coming back to our WordPress servers, let's make this one and this one. And the certificate authority is actually found inside the Elasticsearch, container at this path here. So if I go to our Elastic Stack, and let's say I clear this for a moment, make this a bit bigger screen. Let's get a name for our Docker containers. I've listed this as the Docker name, but that could change for depending on what kind of operating system you're using or what version of Docker you're using or other things. So we should really print the name of that container. And I'll do docker ps-a to see if our stack is still running. Yep, so it's been up and running for quite a while since our last episode. And you can see that this is the container name for the Elasticsearch service. So I will do, so we can copy it out of this container. And if you're not completely certain whether this is the path, what we can do is we can go into this container first. So we can terminal into it, docker exec it container name, and we're going to use bash. Okay, so we're inside the container. You can do an ls. You can see that there's a config directory here. Inside config, there's a certs directory. And in here, you can see there's a CA directory. And you can see our CA certificate here. Okay, and we can copy it into our host machine's temp directory as specified here. Or if we want to cheat, you can print it out like this. And now we can just copy this and go to our WordPress servers, cert esca.cert, and just paste the contents in here and do the same for this one here. All right, so now both our WordPress servers have the certificate authority that was used to sign the SSL certificates for ES01 and Kibana. So coming back to our documentation, normally the next step would be to install the Beats library, but before we do, I think now, just for educational reasons, now it makes sense to come back and talk about these two steps here, 1.3 and 1.4. Basically, actually, especially 1.4. So what 1.4 does is we have some shell script that will create a new user within the Elastic Stack, and that new user will have credentials and privileges that allow the Beats library, the WordPress plugin later for Clam antivirus and other applications. This agent user will be used by those other services to connect with the Elastic Stack. This way, we don't have to share the credentials of the Elastic super user, which is the most privileged account within the Elastic Stack. By creating a separate user to connect to Elastic Stack, in the event there's a security breach or this account gets compromised, we can always turn it off without it affecting the super user or the original Elastic super user. Now, these shell scripts here automate the creation of that user. I don't want to talk about automation yet. Let's create this user manually first, and then we'll talk about how it's automated. So to set up this agent user, what I was doing manually initially was I would just go to our Elastic Stack, go to Stack Management, under Users. Here we can manually create a new user. So I can click here and we can call this agent. Actually, I forgot what name we called it. Give me a moment. Okay, so the username was actually called My Agent, and the full name we can call anything we want. The email can be anything we want. And the password we chose was something simple, change me. And I'll change me. And the role we gave it, just for demonstration, we use the admin role, or super user actually. Okay, we'll go ahead and create user first. Or actually, before I create user, let me say that super user is not the best role to use for production. We really should de-escalate these privileges to what we really need. And ideally, for every one of the services that connect to our Elastic Stack, there should be a different user. So maybe a Beats user with roles specific to the Beats user. For the Clam antivirus, we should have a different user just for Clam antivirus with reduced privileges, and so on and so on. I don't want to go into that too much here because that would just make this video a little bit too long. But if you go to our Beats series, so any of these videos, part 1 videos of any of these Beats series, we do talk about the appropriate privileges that you can use for each one of the beats. And if you don't want to go through these videos in length, there's also a write-up for each beat where you can see these are the role permissions that you can set. Okay, and this one is for metric beat, but if you click to file beat, we should have explanation about the roles and permissions here as well. And also on the Elasticsearch documentation, they also repeat the privileges and roles that are that makes the most sense for each of the beat users. Okay, so just to keep this, this lecture series concise and just to the point, we'll create only one user, which we'll call the My Agent user, give it the super user role, just so all our services can use it. Okay, so if I click create user, this is the manual way that you would go ahead to create that My Agent user. And this user, the credentials, which were username My Agent, password is change me, those are what we're going to pass over to the Beats library when it tries to connect to Elasticsearch. So coming back to our documentation here, if we want to create if we want to programmatically create the agent user, you can see what the steps are or what curl statements need to be made by looking at this particular file. So let's take a look at that right now. WordPress, or yeah, that's it, ES scripts. So in here, we have a setup step 1.4. So we have this file here, which references setup users. If I go to setup and look at the users, you can see that this is basically just a curl statement to the Elastic host with your Elastic super user and Elastic pass. And these were the same type of information that we typed into the user interface. Okay, and you could run this command from the Kibana dev tools as well. So how this would work is, give me a moment. Let me just go to Kibana. If we go to here, go to dev tools. Okay, so I have a whole bunch of stuff here. This is because this browser just cached some cookies from my previous tutorials. But normally you might see this as a completely empty space if you're using Kibana for the first time. All right, so to create a user, it would basically be the same as this. We're doing a post statement to this endpoint, and then we give it the agent username. So let's do post. Oops, and we do my agent. And the data we want to give it is this. So we paste this immediately underneath here. And the password we gave was change me. Okay, so I could run this, which will probably complain that this user already exists. Right, it's probably because it already exists. If I want to delete that user, so let me just open this up for a moment. Go to users over here. And let's delete this user. Delete. This operation can't, oh, there we go. And now if I run it, there we go, it created, and if I hit refresh, there we go, we see this user again. So this command here is exactly the same as this command, except here we're using an API, the Elasticsearch API to do this. This Kibana Dev Tools is basically a user interface wrapper to running these sets of commands. Now you'll notice that I've parameterized these as variables. And these variables come from this .env file. And right now we don't have a .env file, but we do have, if I come back up here, an environment sample file, this one. So what we need to do is make a copy of this first. Right? And once we make a copy of this, then all these shell scripts, bash scripts, are able to reference the variables in here to properly connect to Elasticsearch. So you can see our connection details here. We're referencing ES01 as the host name and Kibana. So we're not using IP addresses, which means we're going to, in fact, let me just do a ping. I don't think I've, right. So we haven't, on this machine, it doesn't know where ES01 and Kibana links. The ES01 and Kibana are only known within the Docker environment. So we need to update our host files here as well to 7.0.0.1 ES01 Kibana. And I'm just going to use localhost IP address instead of the public IP address. This way, none of the traffic that's called from this server, and when it needs to access itself, it doesn't need to traverse the public networks. It just stays all within the local environment. All right, so by making a copy of this .env file and making sure that these connect to the Elastic instance that we want to, all our shell scripts in here should now be usable. And again, as mentioned in the demonstration video, if you have another instance of Elastic and Kibana, you could really just change these endpoints or these URLs, and these scripts would be usable for that as well. So that summarizes basically what we did here, right? Make a copy of the .env file so that we can use these shell scripts, and then make sure that ES01 and Kibana are actually pointing to the appropriate machines that you want our shell scripts to run against. And the first shell script we're going to run is programmatically create this my agent user. In fact, let's delete this user. We created it manually. We created it through these dev tools, and now we should be able to create it from this step here. Created, and now if I hit refresh, great, the user is back. Coming back to our documentation, I think we're now ready to actually install the Beats library. Now these steps are the same as our previous videos. These steps are explained on the Elasticsearch website as well for the Beats library. So I'll just take this and install it to each of our WordPress servers. I'm going to paste it into a shell script so that we can run it all at once. Make it executable. All right, and let's do the same on the other server. Okay, and let's run this. Sure, okay. Shouldn't take too long, so we'll just wait until everything is done. All right, everything is installed. So now if we actually go to the etc directory of any of the servers, and if you look over here, I go ls_star.beat, whoops, or maybe beat. Yeah, so actually, you'll see that we have a few directories here: audit beat, file beat, metric beat, and packet beat, which reflect the things that we've installed. And for each of these directories, there are configuration files: auditbeats.yaml, and filebeat.yaml, metricbeat.yaml, packetbeat.yaml. I've already talked a lot about these in our previous beats series, but I'll just highlight a few things. Each of these files, basically, you're gonna have to state how you want output, or where you want to connect your outputs to. In our case, we want to connect our outputs to Elasticsearch, which means we're going to have to pass in Elasticsearch credentials to each one of these YAML files. The other thing we can do is we can configure these YAML files to state what it is about these WordPress servers that we want to monitor and what data we want to ship over to Elasticsearch. Again, I've explained a lot of those in our previous Beat series. So instead of manually editing them, I've actually created some templates for you that I've pre-configured already, which we used in our demonstration series. So if I come back over here, this is our Elasticsearch server. I have a folder here called Beats. And in here, I already have these YAML files made for you and a few additional configuration files that we will find useful for monitoring WordPress installations. So what I'll do is I'll just copy these files over to each of our WordPress servers, and then I'll explain the changes as opposed to manually editing them and risk having any typing mistakes. So let's copy all these over to the first WordPress server, into the etc directory, and the same for the second WordPress server. Okay. So let's go to our first WordPress server, and let's take a look at maybe metricbeat first. And we'll look at this metricbeat.yaml. So I will talk about this last, but first, I would say that I don't think I've really changed anything in these settings here. I did mention the Kibana. This is how we're going to connect to Kibana at this URL. We've already updated our host file so that this host name knows to reach the IP address of our Elastic Stack. Now you see that this is using SSL, and the SSL certificate was signed by a certificate authority within the Elastic Stack. And we have a copy of that certificate authority now. So that's why I pasted in here. And this actually differs from our previous videos on metric beat, audit beat, and such. I believe in these series, our beats were connecting to Elasticsearch using the publicly signed certificates. In this episode, our Elasticsearch is using SSL certificate or self-signed certificates. Sorry, let me take a step back. Our Elasticsearch and Kibana is signed by our own certificate authority. So it's not a public CA. So in this video, we actually mention our CA file, whereas in these videos, we do not need to. Okay, so that's one difference. And then for Elasticsearch, pretty much everything is the same, except again, we're using SSL that is signed by our own certificate authority. So we reference it here as well. Now, for these few fields here, we're using the my agent and change me, which we specified in the environment file of our shell scripts. Now, what I recommend for production is that you use the metric beat key store. So we talk about that in these series here, in all the part ones. We don't want to leave human readable text or human readable secrets in a file like this. In the event someone gains access to the server, they're going to steal your username and password. By using the key store, none of that information will be provided here. Credentials will be encrypted within the key store vaults of the beat series. And you can find, so we discussed that in the part one of every one of these beats, because every beat will have their own key store. Or if you just read our documentation here, oh, what happened? Let me just click. Okay, give me a second. Something's weird with my mouse. Okay, sorry about that. My mouse was just a bit sticky. Anyway, I refresh the page and you can see here that in our documentation, we also explain how to create or use the key store, right? It's in this segment over here where you're creating these API keys. And once they're available as an API key, you can, let's see, run this key store command such as this, and then it will load whatever key you put in here into here during runtime. Okay, so I recommend that for production usage, you use a key store and not leave human readable confidential information in here. All right, so that's basically all we did on this file. Just establish the connection to our Elastic Stack. And the other thing that I should mention then is this with metric beat, we have this modules.d directory. And this modules.d directory, if we go in here, there are a bunch of configuration files that have been disabled. And should you enable them, it allows metric beat to monitor the performance of that particular service. You can see that out of the box, there's one for apache.yaml disabled. And because it has the extension .disabled, it's not being read by metric beat, because this metric beat YAML file says only find files that end with .yaml. So what I did was I gave you this one, apache.yaml. So this is a new file that we created, or I secure copied over from our Elastic Stack. And in it, it's saying we are going to monitor the performance of Apache and send that information over to Elasticsearch. Right? So to monitor the performance of Apache, I need to talk about something we did in our last video. So let me see if I can find our GitHub project. Okay, I don't have it opened up, so give me a moment. So I came back to my Elasticsearch server, and in here, we have this WordPress directory, and we use this install wordpress.sh on each of our WordPress servers. One of the commands we ran back here was a2enmod status. And this is saying enable Apache's status monitoring page, I suppose. Enable that so that authorized people can view a status page and download the information. So by running this command, what this command will do is, if I jump back to my WordPress server, let's X out of, or let me keep this open, but I'm going to do a shell. And if I go to etc apache 2, and if I go to mods enabled directory, we're going to see something called status, I believe. Let's see, status. .conf. Right. So this status.conf has been enabled. So this file has been enabled. By enabling this file, we're saying that if someone visits web1.evermite.net/server-status, and if the person who's visiting this URL is from the localhost, then we should be able to see some performance metrics. Or actually, let me just do one more thing. I'm going to change the IP address. Give me a moment. I have to figure out what the IP address of my current Windows machine is. Okay, DOS says I'm at 192.168.88.14. So I'm going to update this. 168.88.14. So actually, before I reload it, let's actually go to our web browser. Okay, I opened up Web 2 and I opened up Web 1. If I press refresh, it says forbidden. But if I actually visit it from, if I do systemctl reload Apache 2, by reloading Apache 2, we will now have, this rule will now be recognized, which means, yes, my computer should be able to see these pages now. Oh, maybe not yet. Okay, I got things working. So really the issue was that in my status.conf, and I should be editing the one in the mods available, not the mods enabled, because I believe the ones in the mods enabled is just a symbolic link to this directory in the first place. But in my require IP, I need to state the public IP address of my office network and not necessarily the local IP address of this machine. Of this Windows machine. That's because I just remembered we're hosting Web 1 on a cloud server and not a virtual machine within my office network. So because this WordPress server is in a cloud, is on a virtual machine in a cloud network in the public, I need to do require IP from my office network. And once you do that, you do systemctl reload Apache 2, and that's when you can see the operational metrics of Apache. And you can also access it from localhost, so from the WordPress server itself. Okay, and if I look at server status.1, I will have the operational metrics here. This URL will not be visible to anyone else. And it is this server 1 server status URL that metric beat will observe and consume and parse and send over to send the data over to Elasticsearch. So now if I exit out of here, coming back to this Apache YAML file, what this will do, it's actually looking here and it will append a server-status here to consume all the metrics and performance information about Apache before sending it over to Elasticsearch. So that's what the apache.yaml does. Okay, so let's see what else we have in here. We also have a mysql.yaml. And this will monitor the status and performance of MySQL for these three databases. So you'll have to update the make sure the credentials are correct in order to be able to get the metrics for this database performance versus this one versus this one. And we also have, what else do we have? A system. All right, so we're just going to grab information about this server, things like CPU usage, load, memory, network information, process information, socket information, some file system and fstat related information, system uptime or hostname uptime. All that information will be streamed to Elasticsearch. So these three YAML files that I've mentioned, they will, and any new YAML files that you put into this directory, they will automatically be hot reloaded by metric beat or metric beat will detect changes in this modules.d directory and stream the appropriate information to Elasticsearch. So that's basically the metric beat component. So now let's look at file beat next. So in here, pretty much the same thing as metric beat. I don't think I have anything new to add other than we have, similar to metric beat, we have a modules.d directory. Any new configuration files we'll just throw in here, and file beat will automatically pick up those changes and establish new connections or ship the new information you want to ship over to Elasticsearch. And then down here, our connections to Kibana, just like metric beat. And here is our connection to Elasticsearch. Again, you should probably use the key store, and all the information is in our beat series and also in our written up documentation for each beat. So let's take a look at the modules.d directory. I'll see what I have enabled here. All right, so we've got some of these here. Let's take a look at Apache. So I think for this, Apache is going to try to read the var log access.log. So this one, Apache access.log. So this file will be streamed over to Elasticsearch because of this, and the error.log. So this file here will be streamed over to Elasticsearch. Audit D, right, so just consume anything in the audit D logs, which is a basic Unix log. Same thing with IP tables. Assuming you have IP table information journaled out or logged to the system. If you don't actually have an IP tables command that logs information, then FileBeat will just not really have anything to stream over to Elasticsearch. Okay, so let's take a look at MySQL, because that's a custom one. Again, just read any logs within the MySQL directories and just stream that over to Elasticsearch. And system, just very typical syslog and authorization or login information that will be sent over to Elasticsearch. All right, so that's FileBeat, and nothing out of the ordinary. For the audit beat, so a lot of the things that we're going to do in later episodes will depend a lot on some of the information sent over from audit beat. So let's take a look at this file, auditbeat.yaml. Again, nothing out of the ordinary here. It's same setup as metric beat and file beat. I think the only thing I really modified in this file was I think I added this one line, or I enabled it, because in one of the rules or alerts that we talk about in later episodes, we want to modify any changes to the sudo or file. So by enabling this line, we are able to capture that. These two were already enabled when you just kind of use audit beat right out of the box. We're going to detect any changes in these directories, any changes. Oh, and I also added this. So if there's any changes to web 1, web 2, web 3, web 4, web 5, or anything in the web directories, we want those reported to Elasticsearch. And later on, in later episodes, we're going to do a few more specific rules so that we're not just looking at the entire web directory, but I'll discuss that in later episodes. And all these, yeah, just pretty typical information that we're streaming over to Elasticsearch. And here we're going to do the connection to Kibana and connection to Elasticsearch, just like the other two beats. Okay. In here, I didn't add any new rules that will be hot reloaded, so nothing to mention over here. And here's packet beat. So packet beat is one of the things I use the least amount. So I don't really have anything new to add that I haven't discussed in our previous beat series. So all I did was just take this as is and just update the connection to Elasticsearch and Kibana. So let me see. Yeah, I'm going to connect to Kibana here and connect to Elasticsearch. So let's see what, I guess we're just I did reduce the number of protocols we're going to monitor. So I really just want to monitor these 3 protocols. I deleted all the other protocols and ports that aren't relevant to our setup. So that's basically all the configuration files for our beats library. So I come back over here. We've got our configuration files, and we've already updated. Yeah, our configuration files have access to the credentials for the agent user. So now we're ready to configure. We need to configure Elasticsearch so that it's prepared to start using all these beats. And I have all of them kind of jumbled here into one block like this. I think a colleague told me to maybe separate it so that you can see clearly that this is just for metric beat, this is just for file beat, audit beat, and packet beat. So I'll do that maybe a little bit later. But just so you can see, these three lines will just kind of, so this line is testing to make sure our metricbeat.yaml configuration file is properly constructed, that there are no parse errors or syntax errors. Then we're going to test to make sure this the connection to Elasticsearch is correct. And if it's correct, then we go ahead and run the actual setup. And what setup will do is, if you actually look at our Elastic Stack, one of the things that we're going to do is, you notice there's no dashboards here. When we run this setup command, one of the things it will do is it's going to populate this catalog of dashboards so that we have boiler template dashboards to use. Other things this command will do is it'll set up a bunch of resources that metric beat will need. So specific indices, some data views, and just a whole bunch of other resources. So that's what these three commands do for metric beat. And I'm just repeating it for file beat, for audit beat, and for packet beat. All right. So one thing you can see that I've mentioned here is run this step only once, right? Because we're configuring Elasticsearch. We're not configuring the beats themselves. And you only need to configure Elasticsearch once in preparation for these beats. So we'll just do this on one of the servers, and then we can completely ignore this in the future. Unless you want to overwrite the settings in Elasticsearch and just reinstall everything, then you can run this again. But let's take this to our first one of our servers. It doesn't really matter which. And I'll just go here. Let's say configure ES for beats. I'll just paste all this stuff in here. Configure ES for beats, and let's just run this. So it could take a moment, so I'll just pause until this is all done. Okay, looks like everything was installed. I think it finished a few minutes ago while I was getting some snacks. But yeah, you can see no errors. And you'll know that things were properly configured and set up because now if we go to our Elasticsearch and go to dashboards, maybe let me hit refresh. There we go. All these have been loaded into Elasticsearch now. And if we go to index management over here, and we maybe show the hidden indices, let me see. Maybe if I type metric. Yeah, so you can start to see that there are some data streams and indices related to our beats. Right, under data streams, these have all been set up. So now we can start accepting beat information from any server at all, which means we're ready to move on to the next step. We can, I am actually going to skip this step for now, because this step here will just do some additional setup and give us additional features that we use in later episodes. I don't want to automatically set those up. I want to manually create them in later episodes, and then we'll do the automation and programmatically automate things later. So I'm just going to skip this, and let's just turn on our beat service. So you can see enable metric beat, start metric beat, enable file beat, start file beat, etc., etc., etc. So I'll just take this and put onto our first server. Let's say start beats.sh over here. Start beats, and we go ahead and start beats and do the same thing on the other server. Start beat. Okay, so things should be coming through. Now, if we go over to, let's say, go to observability, overview, there we can see our two servers. MetricBeat is publishing host information and resource usage on our two servers here. FileBeat is giving us some Apache information. In fact, let's go to Web 1 and Web 2 and Web 4 and such. All right, I've got all 6 websites opened up. Let's just hit refresh on some of these maybe. And let's go back over here. I'll just hit refresh here for a moment to see if any interesting new logs come in. It might take a few seconds to a minute for some of the information to come through. If anything, we can do what we did in our original demonstration video. Let's just take a look at FileBeat, or let's take a look at Apache. We can look at MetricBeat and FileBeat. Right, so you can already see things coming in through for FileBeat related to Apache, and you can see Apache performance here. And I'm pretty sure MySQL should be fine as well. SQL. So let's see if there's anything interesting in these. Right, so we're getting MySQL data already. We're seeing MySQL data coming in for FileBeat as well, and MySQL data coming in for MetricBeat. So I think we've basically completed the setup of all the beats. And at this point, everything we've done could be applied for generically across any Linux server, because we've set up beats in a very generic way. So you could have Python applications or Node.js or Golang applications or something else running on these servers, and everything we've done until this point with these beats would still apply. So I think in the next video, we'll talk about WordPress integration, and we'll manually set up a few of the resources or manually set up some of the connections between WordPress and Elasticsearch. And then we'll come back and programmatically do some of the things mentioned in this step here. I just noticed the mistake where I'm not getting any MySQL performance data for MetricBeat from the second WordPress server. So if I narrow this down to just the WP2, nothing is coming in here. There we go. So it's all empty, even if I hit refresh many times on any of the websites on second server. And I think I ran into the same problem during the demonstration, I think, because I forgot to update the credentials to MySQL for the MetricBeat on the second server. So let's go to the second server. Go to MetricBeat modules.d, and in the MySQL, we needed to replace the credentials here. So let's do that quickly. Web 1 with Web 4 and 2 with 5, 3 with 6. Oops. All right, let's restart MetricBeat. And in a moment, if things are working, we should start seeing MySQL data come in from the second server. So I'll pause for maybe a minute or so. Here we go. It took about 15 seconds or so. Now we're starting to see some data. I'll wait just a little bit longer. Yep, looks like it's coming through now. All right, that's pretty much it for this episode. So in our next episode, we'll start talking about WordPress integration.